Is it profitable? Is it not? We'll probably never know. Happy Friday, friends! It's Friday. It is Friday. Hopefully you had a wonderful week. There's been some interesting topics smattered around the universe of Microsoft, Xbox, and beyond. So let's dive into it. But I think the most important thing this week, which I will detail out here why we may not ever know the answer to, is Xbox Game Pass profitable? Was the blog post heard around the world. However, prior to that, Microsoft's Outlook did go down. If you had email issues this week, it wasn't you. It was definitely Microsoft. They said they've got it all just about fixed, and so there you go. Now, one of the hottest things that is happening right now are browsers. Browsers are back in the headlines, and Microsoft is coming out and saying, look, our browser is just a little bit faster than yours. They say they've achieved a major milestone of the first contentful paint, FCP as it is known in the industry, below 300 milliseconds. However, I don't think that's the biggest news really related to browsers here in a long time. So here's the deal. OpenAI and Perplexity also launched a browser, was it a couple weeks ago or last week, something like that, but you got to be paying $200 a month for their iteration. However, it is expected that OpenAI will also be launching a browser soon. And this is going to be a massive deal for the industry, not just because it's like, hey, there's another browser or something like that. But right now, it's obviously Chrome. Edge is back there, cat scratching its way up and trying to get more usage share out of it. If there's one company, in my opinion, out there that could really try to disrupt this industry, it's OpenAI. OpenAI they have the Kleenex, they have the Crayola, they have the crayon, right? They have the brand name and the wherewithal to actually probably do some damage to some of the incumbents in this market. So Google's probably very nervous. Microsoft is probably whatever, because they're going to come out with Copilot browser, I'm sure, 3 months after this. But something like that. OpenAI coming for the browser war is about to heat back up, and the winner most likely will be you at the end of the day, because more choice is always a better thing. If you have been saying, I would use a Copilot Plus PC, but if they only had a desktop processor, well, Intel, it looks like their next generation, their upcoming Core Ultra series will feature NPUs and allow you to do all the things that NPUs let you do. So just be on the lookout for that if that is something that's really been holding you back. But yeah, that's sort of been the big tech news headlines of the week. I know there's still a lot of fallout from the layoffs, but it's mid-July, technically mid-July today. So keep that in mind. So let's jump on over to the gaming news, because this is where the spicy drama was happening this week. And the first thing, which Microsoft's got to be careful here, is they put Call of Duty World War II up on the Microsoft Store version up, and apparently had a flaw. And apparently they had to pull it down. And yikes-a-ronies, people were quite literally getting, quote-unquote hacked here because of a vulnerability that existed in this game, allowing people to inject and remote code executions, it appears, on other people's computers, which is a major issue. And so, yeah, looks like that was just a little bit of an oopsie. So the big news of the week was this. Is Game Pass profitable? And I am here to tell you, friends, it doesn't matter. And you will never know. And we will never know unless there's some massive court case that cracks open the nut that is Microsoft. So before I even get into some of this information, Microsoft has never shared, I don't think publicly, how many Xbox Series S and X consoles they have. They don't even tell us how many people are in Game Pass. So the likelihood of them telling us how they allocate revenue when it comes to Game Pass it's so close to zero that neutrons are no longer moving. We're almost near absolute zero Kelvin at this point. Because let me explain something to people of the listening agenda. I don't know why I fumbled through that. Look, if there's one thing I know, it's accounting. I literally have a degree in accounting, and this business that Microsoft is talking about here, the industry is talking about, Game Pass, is a purely accounting thing that you will never know. Let me explain a couple scenarios here that will help you understand why I mean. We will never know if Game Pass is profitable, because there's a million different ways you can cut up the revenue that makes up Game Pass. So I've got 3 scenarios here. Let's go through them. So the first scenario here is all Game Pass revenue is kept separate, meaning that if I, Joe user, sign up for Game Pass, my $20 a month goes into a revenue bucket for Game Pass, and it's fully recognized as Game Game Pass revenue and nothing else. So it only covers the overhead of Game Pass, the team keeping that service online, and zero of it goes to the studios. Now, that would mean absolutely Game Pass is profitable because look, Game Pass at the end of the day does not make games. Game Pass does not own games. Game Pass is a constructed service that encompasses things, but it's like Airbnb. Airbnb doesn't own any hotels. Game Pass doesn't own any games. So when I pay Game Pass, I'm not paying for any games directly. I'm paying for this service, and the service itself, if you don't include anything else, is profitable. That is a very real accounting model that could exist, and Microsoft could do that. Now, this is an extreme scenario that I'm trying to do like two ends of the spectrum here initially, where it's like, look, Game Pass revenue is just Game Pass revenue, and it ignores everything else, and it never shares any of it. That is a pure accounting model, and something Microsoft, in theory, could do internally if they really wanted to. Now, however, the studios are going to get rightfully upset at that and be like, look, you only exist because we build games that cost us money to make, and then they go into your service, so you should have to give us some revenue to cover that. So yes, I agree. So the second scenario is that Game Pass distributes every single dollar that it makes. So when you pay your $20 in, some percent, let's say 1% of that goes to cover the engineering and overhead and infrastructure and everything surrounding like actually making Game Pass, the marketing as an easy example, to exist, and 99% gets paid out to the studios, right? At the end of the day, so Bethesda or whoever or their Game Pass deals get 99% of the revenue split over some metric that we do not know. We believe it's tied to how many game minutes are played per user in some metric like that. In that scenario, I guarantee you Xbox Game Pass from the overhead perspective is probably operating at a loss because 99% of the money, which is not including overhead and everything else, it's just including 99% of raw revenue is going out the door. It's probably operating at a loss. So in that scenario, Game Pass is not profitable because of the accounting. In the first scenario, it's absolutely profitable the way that it is. Now, let's see here. The scenario number 3, which is probably most likely accurate, is that some percentage of the Game Pass revenue is distributed out. And however, the arguments that have been made are that that if you are paying for Game Pass, your money is money that you did not spend buying the game. So we'll use Indiana Jones. I played Indiana Jones through Game Pass. I did not buy it. So that's $60 that the game studio did not get. So what should happen here is that studio can do like some rough math that says, well, if we actually would have sold that copy to that person playing Game Pass, then we would have made more money. And so by doing all this, we lost money, and so Game Pass is a net negative. There's a big fundamental problem with that assumption, and you could model all this out. The primary one is I personally probably would not have played Indiana Jones unless it was in Game Pass, so they would have gotten $0, and I know that I'm not alone. Now, granted, there are absolutely people who would have paid that $60, but there's also a percentage of them, like myself, who would not have not. So the point of all this is, depending how Microsoft does their accounting, it can be profitable, it can be not profitable. I guarantee they probably try to make it profitable internally because you don't want an unprofitable business unit. But at the end of the day, it's purely accounting and just how they allocate the funds once they come in through the door, whether or not it's profitable or not. Because again, Xbox Game Pass does not make games. Its only expenses are what it determines to pay out by some magic formula that Microsoft will never share with us about how it's done. And it's just too small of an entity inside of a $1 trillion company to ever realize and figure out. So yes, it absolutely could be profitable. I don't doubt that. But to what context and how does it work and how does it all play out? We don't really know, and we won't ever know. And people can say one way or another, but Microsoft's not going to share how it's done. So I just wanted to give some like context to how that potentially could play out and just help our dear listeners understand that when they say, yes, Xbox Game Pass is profitable, but that genuinely just doesn't mean anything unless there's real numbers and facts and we can actually see a balance sheet of how it's being split out, because we don't know what's happening at the studio level, right? If Game Pass is profitable, but every single studio is bleeding money, then it's like, is it really profitable? It's like, it's profitable because you're just taking money from over here, so you got to give some back. And that's sort of the point at the end of the day that I just wanted to bring up. So anyways, Xbox is going to the Tokyo Game Show. I'm not sure what they're going to show yet, but they will be there. And so, yeah, that is That's that. Anyway, so let's jump into my favorite part of the week, always of the week, which is, or I should say, are the questions. We're going to kick it off here with Mr. DB Cross. He says, with the reduction in the Xbox studios, does this mean we will see more single-player stories on Game Pass as they are the most profitable options for Game Pass subscriber growth? Here's the thing. You could make that argument, but here the problem with this and me just saying like, yeah, I'm sure they're going to do that is like these things take years. So if they're going to do that, they actually needed to make that decision a couple of years ago. And it seems like they have made that decision, and which is why we have Doom as single player. We've got a bunch of single player titles coming out, and that they're very clearly faster and easier to make. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw more single player, less big multiplayer games, which are more expensive to develop, take more time, because as we all know, the linear style game is much easier to produce. So we'll kind of got to just pay attention to see what Xbox announces going forward, because at this point they should have learned enough to know that question, to answer the question that you asked. Have Fun in Life says, is the new direction for Xbox if this new direction for Xbox doesn't do well, talking specifically about anything and everything being an Xbox, what are the chances Microsoft gives up on Xbox as a gaming platform and only focuses on building gaming PCs? I gotta say, there's a non-zero chance of that happening. I think they would do it more carefully and cautiously. I don't think they're ever going to fully give up on Xbox in one way or another. They would spin it off and sell it. It's too valuable as a brand to do that. Like, they could spin this out and make more money, and people can say, well, they should do that anyways. It'd be better alone. I'm here to tell you it would not be better alone. It has the bankroll of Microsoft behind it, and so it is better off inside the org, at least from a get funding perspective. But it would be a gradual shift to that. Microsoft is not going to come out and say, nope, no more Xboxes, pure third party from here on out. Because again, you got to think about their connections with the consumer. It's already fragile. And yeah. So he says, hey, it's Alex asking about accessibility. Speaking of that, I tried Start 11. It's basically unusable if you are blind, as the UI does not highlight correctly. Could you look into this, as blind folks like me should be able to use this properly? I assume other tools face the same issue. So, interesting feedback. Here's one of the challenges of what we do. We do build a lot of interface tools. I'm not completely familiar with our accessibility offerings at this time. Now, what I'm trying to say here is it takes effort and it takes work and it takes feedback for us to get there. As of right now, I thought we built it so that it could be used with the screen reader functionality. Typically we do that. I'm pretty sure Multiplicity had that baked in at one point, but it's good to know. And so we will get that filed into the feedback about what we can do. One of the candid challenges is that we're a small company, and so we have to devote engineering resources to this, and it's challenging in a time perspective in a fast-moving world where Microsoft breaks their stuff and we try to stay ahead of it. So, good feedback. Someone would be like, well, why don't you just edit that out? Because talking with our customers is the best thing that we can do. That's how we get better at the end of the day. Jovier says, Brad, Microsoft continues to treat Xbox as a corporate Xbox. When is enough for Xbox fans? It's not only about us customers, but also the people who work there and that make Xbox really matter. To the end of the day, Microsoft doesn't care. Microsoft looks at Xbox. Xbox is a business. It needs to make money, and it's not a passion project. It's not a feel-good place. Microsoft is a publicly traded company, and they care about one thing and one thing only, making money. Sony is the same way. So, and Nintendo is the same way. They all are just trying to make the most amount of money with the least amount of expenses. And so it is corporate Xbox, because at the end of the day, those jobs survive because corporate, funds them and makes things happen. So unfortunately, that's the way it is. It's the way it's always been. And that's why these projects don't always survive in the world of Microsoft, because Microsoft chases high margin, sustainable, reoccurring revenue businesses. And right now they're trying very hard to make an Xbox reoccurring revenue stream, but they're not getting there fast enough. It seems to be the thing. Mr. DB Crossick almost called him Mr. PKI with two more questions, as he likes to do. He says, if Xbox moves to the PC platform, won't we run into the massive waves of cheaters again? And since it is much easier to modify and have cheats on PC platforms compared to Xbox, that is a valid and fair feedback. One of the primary complaints of the PC is cheating, right? You got to run these kernel level anti-cheats, which nobody likes. And if Xbox goes more PC, aren't we going to run into more of that? Almost certainly. And then his next question is, when is Windows 12 coming? We are waiting for something new. I am waiting for Windows 12 as well. I don't know when it's coming. I would love to know if anybody knows when Windows 12 is coming. Please let me know, because I would be very interested to know that too. And Roman says, with the last question of the week, he says, Brad, according to the rumors, the new Xbox could cost $1,000. Considering that Microsoft had difficulty selling consoles for $500 and $300, what do you think will make these consoles sell? So here's the reality is Microsoft is facing this problem, but so is Sony. If you're going after high horsepower consoles, these price points, look at the PS5 Pro. It's already there. So the likelihood of it approaching higher is, I think, a given at this point. Will Microsoft sell more consoles at that price point? I don't think that they will. I think they will have trouble. I think Sony will have trouble as well, right? The PS5 Pro specifically are fine consoles, much like the Xbox Series S and X are fine consoles. If the PS6 and next generation Xbox come out and they're $700 to $1,000, they're going to have trouble selling them. We already know this because look how much trouble they had selling initially PS5s, not just because of the scarcity, but a lot of people just stay on PS4. Look how many games are still being developed for that platform. And so will this push more people towards PC gaming? Absolutely. And I think that's what Microsoft is kind of banking on. I think that's why we're seeing that convergence of Xbox and gaming happening. So there you go. There you go, guys. What a week. What a week. Hopefully the Game Pass stuff being, profitable and unprofitable all makes sense. As always, my friends, make sure to keep it subscribed here because the only BS on this podcast is me.